Hello and welcome. It is your weekend Managing Madrid Podcast. This is your host, Gabe Lezra, and I'm joined by my man, Kiyan Sobhani. Kiyan, Slanja. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
I guess that was yesterday, but whatever.
I think mine was probably a bit tamer than yours. I was putting my son to sleep, and that was the height. That was the peak of my St. Patty's Day.
I can only imagine that, like, putting your child to sleep is, like, right after that is not the moment you want to go out and drink a bunch of Guinness.
No, man, it was probably not quite the gong show that you went through.
No, not exactly. But you know what? It's a fun, silly holiday that I've celebrated all over the world at this point, and it's one of those that I just lean into. Like, it's the kind of thing that can get super duper annoying, and I get that people don't like it, but like, if you just lean in, like, it's pretty fun. It's like drinking good stout and yelling about Ireland, which is fun because I'm not Irish at all. Like, I'm the least Irish person. Well, not the least, but like extremely not Irish. So it rules.
Let's be clear, most people who celebrate this are not Irish.
That's a good point. It's because there are not that many Irish people, and this is a really, like, broadly celebrated holiday.
So how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling tired. I'm fine. I'm a little hungover, but not so bad. Like, it could have been definitely worse. So, as it was the year that I celebrated in Cadiz, where my friend Josh, shout out, I don't know if he listens to the show. I think he does sometimes. Josh and I were drinking on the beach in the south of Spain. It was very cool. That night, very hungover, yeah.
Was anyone else celebrating it? Cadiz is a small place.
Yeah, I mean, there was like 2 expat bars, and we didn't normally go to these expat bars that much, but we went that night to the kind of expat-y Irish bar, and yeah, they had their whole thing. Like, they had like Guinness hats that they were giving people and green beer. The real mistake people make is trying to drink green Guinness, because that shit's just black. It's not going to turn green. It doesn't turn green. People need to stop that.
Can I just use this opportunity to say I love Cadiz?
Cadiz is awesome, man. Yeah. And, they're actually towards the top of the table in Segunda.
Yeah. I think they're coming up next year.
You think so? I think so. Man, that'd be so cool.
I think so.
I'm a huge Cadiz fan. It so far has never been a problem in terms of my rooting interest, except for that one year where where Madrid got eliminated by Cadiz because of the Cherry Chev shit.
Segunda standings. They're third. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're towards the top.
Yeah.
They have a shot. They're in with a shout. Just keep it up, boys.
They're 5 points clear too, with the game in hand.
Yeah, they have a game in hand too.
Yeah, very possible.
It's exciting. It would be really cool to have them up. This is not why people are tuning into this show, though. So, sorry everyone, but just wanted to have a little bit of a digression there, because I mean, Madrid played sort of a game that's kind of like the way this show has started, which is just totally random and really fun. I mean, like, to be clear, like, Madrid wins 6-3 against Girona at the Bernabeu, emulating some of these old classic Real Madrid teams, like the Di Stefano Madrid team that won the final of the European Cup by like 6-4 or whatever.
Yeah, we haven't felt like that with supporting Real Madrid in this season, like the first half of the season. Then 2018, we've had a bunch of these games where we outperform our expected goals, which today they were 3.5. We hit 6. Even Girona, I mean, they outperformed their expected goals. I mean, a 9-goal thriller. It was fun for us, fun for Pablo Machin. I think kind of like hinted it was kind of fun for them, even though they lost there, because scoring 3 goals at the Bernabeu is not common at all. It just doesn't happen unless you're Barcelona generally. And I was interested, Gabe, in how they would set up, because generally they've had a consistent scheme where they go 3-4-3, and a bunch of, like, Diego and I were asked about Girona a couple of weeks ago on the Churros y Tácticas podcast, and we kind of broke it down a little bit on why they've been so successful. And they have this really good defensively compact scheme and a lot of good individually intelligent players who bought into the system. Everyone from Maffeo to Porto, who's been in revelations, to Wani's been on fire. And then you have really solid players like Pere Pons and Mojica. And we were all kind of surprised why they deviated from that and played at a really high line at the Camp Nou. And after the game, Machin basically said, we wanted to play our game, and if we lose, so be it. But I was like, that's not your game. You just
That's not your game, though, right?
Yeah. And so I was wondering what he would do in another big game here, and he kind of went back to playing how they usually do, which was good. But equally, or unfortunately for them, Real Madrid were firing today.
Yeah.
And apart from that setback in the first half where they conceded and they kind of regressed a bit, they looked comfortable, they looked incisive, they looked very quick in the final third, very direct, very vertical, a lot of movement in the final third off the ball. And
a lot of like those little slip through balls that they were just finding that space to put someone through on goal. Like it's the kind of stuff that Kroos does so well, but also like Benzema did it really well. I mean, Kovacic, like just a lot of different players stepping up to drop these balls, and like not tons of flank movement, or when it would be cut back in or whatever. And a lot of danger coming through these kind of balls that everyone likes to see, which are these balls that release a player wide open in space.
Yeah, and they hit them consistently. And it was interesting. Like there was no. Sometimes Real Madrid kind of just recycle possession, and this really felt like there was a different purpose to it, where they kept on looking forward, kept on looking vertical, and everyone from Kroos and Kovacic. Both great, but if you were asking me, I thought Kroos was the standout in this game apart from Ronaldo. I thought he was great all over the pitch, had the most touches, 112, very involved, good defensively, put some good interventions in, and always looking forward. And unfortunately for him, he also missed an assist because Vazquez was incorrectly called offside.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was infuriating.
Brilliantly disguised because it looked like he was about to fire it. And then he just holds it for a second, the defense shifts, and then he plays it. This was like a vintage Kroos performance, and a bit kind of an outlier in terms of where he usually plays in this team in a 4-3-3, because it was a double pivot of sorts, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit, but it was also a bit deeper than he usually plays. You look at his heat map, he played quite deep, in the absence of another anchor in the team and a third central midfielder, but I thought he was brilliant. To me, he was the standout.
Yeah, I loved his performance. Really, really impressive, fun stuff. And I mean, it's good to see him bounce back because he didn't look as good in the previous match. Just he coming back from an injury, he'd been a little bit squeamish, a little struggling, and to come back with this kind of performance, it's actually really, really, really confidence booster for me watching him going forward.
Yeah, and it helped because everyone he was picking out was also in form.
Yeah, it did. And I mean, we should probably talk a little bit about that aspect of it. Zidane rolling out a, kind of the same lineup that he's been, with a couple of additions, but kind of the same lineup that he'd been using that had been working so well. And once again, that Asensio, Vazquez, Benzema, Ronaldo up, front four basically, worked really well.
It did. And I think it was interesting because when you look at it on paper, you're like, okay, this is a very clear 4-4-2. Vazquez on the right, Asensio on the left, Ronaldo and Benzema up top. You see it unfold, and then you check the heat maps later, which confirms it, that Asensio really wasn't on the left at all. He was mostly central.
Yeah.
And also kind of roaming a little bit. And mostly Ronaldo went to the left. And that's his preferred position, obviously, because he can cut in and he had some really nice shots. And he was also able to latch onto through balls because he was also roaming a bit. And Benzema mostly played centrally. So it was almost like, it was almost just basically Asensio down the middle, Vazquez on the right, Ronaldo on the left, and then Benzema drifting centrally. So, but it worked. It worked really well. Everyone played well offensively. Asensio and Vazquez, maybe their performances kind of get lost a little bit, only because everybody else had really great games.
Yeah.
And by everybody, I mostly mean Kroos and Ronaldo. But Asensio also, I thought he was very involved in the first half, especially. He looked really good. He looked sharp. And Vazquez just kind of does his thing. He works hard on the flank. Helped Carvajal battle Mojica a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of these unbelievably consistent players. And, obviously his performances have improved, but he is just one of these guys that you know exactly what you're going to get within some variable range whenever you roll him out there. There's very like in my view, like the worst performance you get from him is one where he's sort of invisible because he's like the ball is on his side of the pitch. But like the difference between that and like that's actually not such a bad performance when you think about it. But like the form he's been in is incredible. I mean, like he's just been scoring and assisting just constantly since. I mean, I knocked over a bunch of papers. Going back to my. Going back to the Real Sociedad game where Madrid won, he's been doing great, and it's hard to I think he's actually making it hard on Zidane to go to a different player. I mean, look at the subs that came in. It was a fascinating game for subs too, right? Because Bale, Modric, and Isco came on to create what was like a weird ersatz version of the kind of Once de Gala from last year.
I think with Vazquez is that we generally recognize him as a very consistent, reliable player. He's like the Nacho of the midfield. Like, doesn't complain, comes in when he's needed, does not want to go to another club and play more because he loves the club. And I think apart from this spell he went through, I guess in the first half of the season where everyone was kind of ragging on Zidane because Vazquez would come in and always be a guaranteed sub off the bench, and he wasn't that great in that little stretch of games at the end of 2017, which, by the way, almost no one on the team was playing well at that point, starter, reserve, or otherwise. But Vazquez was getting a lot of heat because he was always the guy off the bench, and he wasn't playing particularly well either, and he wasn't helping much, and he was kind of running into players. But apart from that chunk, I think in the last 2 seasons now, he's been a very reliable performer.
Yeah, I mean,
more than 2 seasons, I guess. This would
you
be his
bring
third
up
season, yeah.
You bring up Nacho, and I think that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about getting into this, because obviously we're both big fans of Nacho, blah blah blah. But I did think that one of the areas of concern in this match was Madrid just looked absolutely atrocious defending set pieces, and if not to at least the last goal, Nacho was the guilty party when it came to Madrid's issues with that. And it's one of his weaker areas is defending the ball in the air. It's why Sergio Ramos is such a big upgrade. But you've got to feel like he's got to do better especially on that last goal where he was just ball watching and his guy jumped up and knocked that ball in from the corner. And it was just... I mean, the first goal that Girona scored, right, was much more forgivable because they ran a set piece play. Basically, you saw some picks going on. Then Stuani rushed around.
Yeah, I thought I was watching a basketball game. There was screens and picks. Carvajal gets caught on a pick and roll.
It ruled that. And look, let's be clear. Madrid's first goal, that was absolutely also a set play. Like, it looked like an inbounds play if you saw it. Like, it was a short corner, drop back to the original taker who had run onside. Ronaldo gets a couple of picks, and he's looking like he is just going to jog back. And then he just whips around, and then that ball is just right at his feet. It was perfect.
Yeah,
it was just a really gorgeously executed piece of playmaking. And the first goal for Girona was very similar. It was like pretty cool to see these teams execute that kind of stuff, because a lot of times with Real Madrid, you get the sense that this team is just rolling out a bunch of really awesome players and watching them run, which obviously is not really true, but it's so clearly you can see Zidane's hand when you have goals like that.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate that fell to Stuani, and that play was basically ran for Stuani, who was deadly in that situation. But I think you're right. I think the difference, I guess, between the third goal conceded, where Nacho doesn't just is oblivious or doesn't even think. I mean, it's a corner kick, and you're supposed to be marking or defending the space or something. And it just feels like it was weird that he just didn't even click. It didn't even click for him. But the difference between that and the first 2 goals, I guess it was that the first one, it's not like Real Madrid didn't try, and I think possibly unfortunate because Carvajal just can't get there. The second one, he just can't do anything because Stuani just outpowers and outmuscles and just leaps over him. The third goal was more preventable in that sense because Nacho had time and should have had the awareness to at least make a leap, at least put a body on him, on Juanpe, but he didn't.
Yeah.
Possibly an under talked about subject actually, as Nacho hasn't been in great form in the last couple months. And we're talking about Nacho doesn't have many weaknesses. He's very reliable, very consistent servant of the club. His one weakness is definitely his aerial ability. We saw it against Bayern last season. I think, obviously, you're always going to hope that Ramos and Varane are healthy. But, I mean, we kind of knew, and this is what we were always scared. Like, what would happen if Vallejo and Nacho were paired together in a likely scenario this season due to injuries and suspensions? And we actually saw that happen, too, where, like, they were paired together, and it looked shaky for that reason because neither of them are strong in the air. But you're right. Yeah. I know. I mean, luckily, Real Madrid just steamrolled anyway, so it didn't really matter.
Yeah, it didn't really matter. And then the other one was obviously, like, after Madrid's just the whole game had this je ne sais quoi of, like, just Madrid's going to score tons of goals. Like, even when you went into halftime at 1-1, it just felt – it's that feeling that I think has finally come back, Kiyan, where you just kind of know – you're not too worried about the result. I really didn't feel that at all at the beginning of the season with this club, and now I'm back on being like, yeah, they'll be okay. But it did feel like the defense coasted a little bit, especially. I mean, Varane could have gifted Girona 2 goals just by boneheaded, terrible moves. Like, he got absolutely bailed out by Kaylor when he literally just made like what would have been a pretty good like pass to a striker. When he tried to pass back to Kaylor, and it was just really lucky that Kaylor got a save, because otherwise, like, that's an unbelievably and stupid goal.
And it's funny because apart from those 2 plays, he actually had a really good game. But then those like 1 or 2 plays just kind of dampen his performance. He was really good, especially in the first half. I thought he was really good, like just on the ball and his presence.
And he's such a good like sweeping type defender because of his speed, right, and his ability to read the game. I mean, he was even pushing forward amazingly. But it was really cool to see, like, whenever Girona seemed like they were going to get a break, you just get reminded of like the absolute world-class quality of Varane, in that he could just absolutely run down every single person. It just got you this feeling that he was the fastest person out there, and they were never going to beat him in a foot race. So there was never a feeling like, oh, shoot, maybe they're going to get a breakaway, because he was always back there.
Here's the good news. These mistakes are far more likely to happen in a 9-goal thriller in La Liga than in a big Champions League game where you hope to be focused for 90 minutes.
Right, and obviously, Madrid have Juve, so I mean, I think you mentioned that, right? But that's going to be a totally different thing. So hopefully, the defense clues in by then.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're confident they will, just based on precedents and Ramos and Varane playing good in big games generally.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully Ramos exercises a little bit more like discretion when he's like playing defense for Real Madrid than when he's choosing his outfits to go out for the night. But otherwise,
and possibly even maybe using the bathroom at halftime just in case.
Yeah, that that ruled. I forgot about that.
By the way, you weren't on that post-game podcast. I was telling Matt, I was like, I didn't even know that he was off the field. Like, this is how like unexpected the whole thing was, because when has that ever happened where a player just leaves and goes to the bathroom, and then you're like, wow, Real Madrid is conceding a lot of chances on the counter here. Why do they look shorthanded? And then we don't realize until after the game that this actually happened.
It's because he was in the bathroom. We had to pee. It's so dumb. I can't really believe that. Like, it's pretty amazing. Also, I mean, like, there are all these famous examples of. I mean, the most famous example of anything like that happening was the England guy who was ill, and then like he like shit himself on the pitch in the World Cup. Well, and really famous. It was amazing.
But
was that Gary Lineker? Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah.
No shit.
Yeah.
No way the guy that shit himself and then like scooted around like a dog is the same like guy who's doing all the pundit shit 100%. Right now.
Go read the replies to like anything he tweets, and it's like videos of that. And you know what's funny?
So cool.
If you watch the video of the moment that Ramos tells the referee he's leaving to go to the bathroom, he actually doesn't tell a single one of his teammates that he's leaving. He just leaves and he just runs off, and his teammates actually are probably wondering where is Ramos, and it's a real moment.
That's amazing. I can't really deal with that. It's too funny. We'll also say Carvajal had his work cut out for him today. That's another aspect of this match I wanted to mention before we went into questions, because Mojica, he's Portuguese, right? Anyways, regardless,
I think he's Colombian.
Colombian, no, so Mojica. Yeah, he was really good, and he was really putting Carvajal through the paces today, and Carvajal was not very happy that he was having to deal with that.
Yeah, I think actually that was kind of a fun and heated duel between the two, but I think Carvajal generally dealt well, but I think he had a rough game in general because some of the key defensive moments were on him. The first goal was an unnecessary foul, you could argue, on Porto, and then he loses Stuani at the first goal. The second goal, Stuani just bullies him, and then and basically that's what he'll be remembered for, unfortunately. I don't think he was generally bad, but like he definitely did have moments where you're wondering like what he's thinking there.
Yeah. I mean, it did just feel like one of those games from the defense where they weren't entirely clicked in, and that's partially to do with the fact that Madrid was really clicking on offense. So the defense probably didn't feel like, oh, look at the Liga game, like they let their minds wander a little bit, or whatever, right? Like, because even Marcelo, I felt like the players that had a really bad game for Madrid were the defenders, like, and they didn't have bad games, but they were the ones that everyone else basically on the pitch I had no problem with, but with the defenders, like, there were aspects of each one of their performances that were issues. Like even Marcelo, didn't get back quite as well as like I would have wanted him to, though I thought he was probably he was still very good. Also, he's awesome. He rules. Yeah.
No, I think you're generally right. I think the talking points in this game will be kind of from the front six.
Yeah.
And
forgettable game from the defense, but absolutely memorable from that front six. But just incredible. I mean, and we're gonna answer your questions on this, but just suffice to say, it's hard to overstate how lucky we are that Cristiano Ronaldo is on this team.
Yeah, it's amazing that we always go so long without bringing up his name, just because even though he's always like the one guy we should be talking about, and I think it's just because we're desensitized to how great he is, and there's only so much you can say about everything he does. It's like, wow, he's just unbelievable, and it is what it is. Like, he just
yeah, it is. I mean, like, there's not that much more in it, really. Like, he's going to do that. I mean, like, you see the prediction that he made? I forgot in November, he was like, Messi had 11 goals, he had 1, and he was like, I'm going to win the Pichichi, and we kind of laughed about it. But, like,
he made a bet with his teammates.
He might. Like, he's only 3 goals behind him. Messi is, like, 26. Cristiano is 23, I think. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, I think it's 25 and 22, but the fact that he's... I mean, the stunning thing is not so much the number itself, because you're going to look at that like in 10 years from now and be like, oh, he scored this many goals. Yeah. The stunning thing is that he flips the switch at this time of year like he did last year. And I mean, last year his start to the season was much better than this one. But I think it's just like we all joked about it during his slump, but we were like half joking because we were hoping that we were right when we say, well, he's probably going to turn this around, and everything we're going to say about his decline will be completely debunked. And lo and behold, this is it.
Yeah, like, check it out. Like this, and we were also saying it because like he was missing really high expected goals. The chances that really did more come down to like a sense of just bad luck or whatever. Like all the different times he hit the post and all that stuff. Like, and we would say, look, he had a great game. He was being really incisive, cutting in, and just the shots weren't falling. And great players, even the best in the world, do go through slumps, and this, thank God, was just a kind of extended slump from Cristiano that combined like him forcing it a little bit with bad luck.
What I loved about this game, it wasn't just the fact that it was 4 goals and assists, which is ridiculous in its own right. Those are crazy numbers for a single game. By the way, this 4 goals today, I think it matched his entire output from the first half of the season or something ridiculous like that in one game. But he was so involved. Like 10 shots is a crazy amount of shots in the game. 7 of them were on target. 3 key passes. He even dropped deep quite a bit in this game and got a lot of touches on the ball. So the best version of Ronaldo was the one that's involved and not just someone who pops up. I mean, the one who pops up is great too, like the one in Paris who, in my opinion, he didn't have. I wrote about this a little bit in my Raul article last week. I think and I brought it up because Ronaldo in that game, he kind of exemplified that he doesn't need to have a good game to completely change the outcome of the game and pop up and score a great goal. But in this game, it was like he was everywhere. It wasn't just one moment. It wasn't just the goals. It wasn't just the assists. He was a massive leader, like overall.
Yeah, he was incredible. It's like, and I think maybe it's worth at this point going into some of our questions. We have basically, tons of Ronaldo questions, and this, I mean, I don't have much more like off the top of my head that I wanted to write down, because really, like, with a game like this where Ronaldo's creating 5 goals, right? 4 that he scored himself, 1 the assist, like, there's not much from a notepad that, I mean, like, we kind of hit my topics, because I wanted to talk about the defense. I like the kind of, way that Lucas Vazquez has been playing, and then just basically this game was just Ronaldo killing it, and he just absolutely murdered it. He's an incredible player, and we're really lucky to have him.
I have nothing to add to that. It's truth, man. He's an alien. He's completely like from a different planet.
Yeah. So let's jump into some of these questions, because, I mean, we're just going to get to say the same stuff again. So Nick DeStefani asked us, is Cristiano the biggest Band-Aid of all time? What I mean by this is, does Ronaldo's sheer brilliance hide a plethora of other team issues? I'm terrified the second he stops firing, we're also screwed. Example, pre-2018 output, team record, and post-2018 output and team record. So, I mean, like, he is a huge Band-Aid. He is.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're screwed. I think Madrid's done a really good job of building a really deep squad.
Yeah, I think
stops firing. Do you mean like if he's still playing? I think this is the questions I'd ask Nick, right? Like if you mean he stops firing, is that Madrid is still rolling him out there, but he is not scoring and not really aiding to the team? That does hurt the team. Yeah. But if you mean like a world where Real Madrid doesn't have Cristiano Ronaldo, which is eventually going to happen, even if he does play till he's 45, like eventually he's going to have to stop. Then yeah, actually it's a different game then suddenly, where you're creating a different attacking mix and have different people expected to step up and score.
I think, if he stops finishing and it doesn't become as efficient, it's a massive crutch in the team, because basically we have the sample size of early in the season where that exact situation was happening. Because it's funny, if this happens last year, it might not be as detrimental, because the team kind of overall was in better form, and we saw like crazy performances without him. Like you go in the game against Sevilla last year, where we played without him and Bale, and the team just went and won 3-0. I think those moments have been more rare without him this season, and I think because we had been underperforming our expected goals for so long, it really showed. Because Benzema and Bale, Bale was injured for a long time in the season and Benzema wasn't scoring, and the odd Asensio and Isco goal wasn't really enough to compensate for it. So yeah, if he's not scoring, it's a massive crutch.
Massive.
Yeah.
Huge.
And if he is he the biggest Band-Aid of all time? This season, possibly he is. I would say in previous seasons, maybe not as much, but in this season, yes, definitely. In this season where we brought over, even like we were kind of relying on Kaká, so like Ronaldo just took over and put the team on his back multiple occasions and was massive. He's been massive every year. This year might be, even at his age, it's unbelievable that he's still influencing the team. I think certainly if you take him out, it's going to be tough to replace it. But the thing to consider is, the moment you take him out, because he's your main goal scorer, you can't actually compensate it, in my opinion, with the players you have. You have to buy a goal scorer.
Right, no, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So, like, is it, I mean, it's literally just, like, if he is in the team versus not. First of all, Losing Ronaldo, regardless, is a huge nut. It's a huge. You can't replace it. Look at this. You can't replace this. But it's a big difference between having him be a kind of black hole on the team and not contribute versus not having him in the team and then going out and buying Neymar or Mbappe or someone and saying, okay, we're going to structure a new attack with these new players. But you have to have that other person because, right now Madrid is really relying on him for goals, which is why it's so bad when he's not scoring.
Correct. You can replace his offensive curation and ability to play, make, and sling key passes in the final third without him. You can't replace his goals. So the moment he's gone, you can't sign a left winger. You have to sign a goal scorer because that's what you're losing. So you have to sign, like you said, a Neymar or like a Harry Kane even, someone who can just score buckets of goals because let's be clear, he's the only goal scorer in the squad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So the second part of Nick's question is basically talking about how Girona and Manchester City are related. I would love for Madrid to pull a Manchester City and buy a small team in one of Europe's top 5 to 7 leagues as a feeder team. What do you think of this? Seems like it's working extremely well for City, and Castilla is okay for young players, but it isn't even close to get the job done for players that are close to Madrid ready. Can't wait to hear your thoughts. I don't think Manchester City owns Girona. Am I wrong about that?
They have a stake in Girona.
That's fascinating. My immediate thought, Kiyan, was that if you are the majority shareholder and you're owner of another club, that it's possible that the clubs would be grouped together for FFP considerations. But I don't really know how that works exactly in terms of like the ownership stuff. But I don't love that. But I understand why City is doing it. If you have unlimited amount of money, it makes sense to do shit like this. And Madrid, don't have as much money as City, but they do have a fucking shitload of money. So,
yeah, I think it's not 100% ownership, but it's quite a large stake, from what I remember. And there is what you just said reminded me of. There is some kind of conflict of interest law, where I can't remember exactly how it works, but at any rate, they do own a large share, and because of that, they can basically use players like Pablo Machin, and get them guaranteed playing time. And this is
is smart.
Yeah, it is. I think this is where I love the NBA G League system, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, and this is not unique to the Raptors, but the Raptors own the Raptors 905, which is a G League affiliate. And they have a huge roster of players. And anyone who's not getting playing time, they just send down there. And that guarantees them playing at a high level consistently to keep them fresh. You kind of get it with Castilla, but you really absolutely don't, because Castilla is in Segunda B. Not even Segunda B. And the level of play isn't great. And what it would help with, it's not necessarily younger Castilla players. If Real Madrid did something like this, it would be for players like Odegaard, Valverde, who's not playing at all with Depor, Mayoral, who did not play at all with Wolfsburg. And they can get them guaranteed playing time. Because at the end of the day, and I remember speaking to Chris Moore about this, who covers Depor, and he was talking about Valverde. He's like, look, Valverde is a really good, young, promising player, but guess what? Depor have no invested interest or any reason to prioritize his development.
Right.
Because
that's the point.
They know they're going to lose him in a year. And that hurts Real Madrid. Because teams basically, you think that they're going to we get this player for a year. No, they're actually doing the bigger team a favor by bringing them on and playing them for developing them for a bigger team and losing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I like the idea. Getafe was kind of like unofficially that club for us back a few years ago. Where we had a bunch of players on loan there, but we don't do that anymore as much. But I like.
Espanyol worked. I think that Espanyol is a natural fit for Real Madrid, actually, in terms of that, to have a relationship with them. Obviously, right, Asensio played there, but also because they're natural rivals of Barcelona. So, like, it seems like you could make it ally. But like, part of the problem with this is that when you get into situations like where you have teams with ownership interests in other teams. I mean, obviously, Girona probably won't ever play against Manchester City, but don't we have a situation where if Girona and Manchester somehow, I mean, it's not like out of the realm of possibility that Girona gets into the Champions League this year. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible, right? And so if they are paired up against Manchester City, like that's no good, right? Like that's suddenly we're in a situation where you have one team that's an owner of the other team that are playing each other, and you have to call into question the fairness of that match.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what happened in that situation, or if anything, maybe we're overthinking. Because I remember Castilla.
Oh, you're overthinking it.
Castilla actually played against Real Madrid in the Copa del Rey. I think it was in the 80s. And it's possible. Generally, it's possible. And I don't think that there's anything that theoretically would be wrong with it if that happened.
No, I mean, it's just really weird. It leaves some really weird scenario that you would think that,
but possible.
But also, you would think that FIFA would have an interest in not promoting that kind of shit, just because like they really do have a pretty strict rule about anything that calls into question the integrity of the game, not because it's necessarily bad or wrong. For example, to gamble on sports, but because if find out that you're gambling, then suddenly you have fans questioning whether the result was just. And I think that could happen if you have two teams playing against each other owned by the same person.
This is why I remember that there were concerns about conflict of interest when this sale actually happened, but I don't remember what came out of it. Yeah.
I think Madrid would be well served by doing what City is doing in another place, which is getting a team in the United States. City owns New York City FC. I think it's most of it. Co-owns it with the Yankees. And so City has this really strange relationship with NYCFC, but they've made it work. I mean, they brought back Jack Harrison, who they kind of debuted in New York, and he then immediately loaned him out. I mean, that's one way to do it.
Yeah. Possibly. I guess the level won't be as high as you like.
That's the thing. Yeah. That's why I think Nick is asking the question. It's just, look, it's annoying. I don't like that this is happening. I don't like that when Madrid is playing Girona, they're really playing Manchester City, Spain. But whatever. I also love that Girona is like a really cool club and they're doing well and whatever. Good for them. Good on them.
In a way, it's kind of good for La Liga though, because I mean their season is massively successful, and someone like Pablo Machin is a huge part of it.
Good to have these people in the Liga. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few others on loan from City. They're not as prominent, like people like Douglas Luiz, Alex Garcia. And a couple others I can't remember, but the main one is definitely Maffeo.
Yeah. Mark Reedy asks us, what are the odds of Ronaldo catching Messi in La Liga this year, in terms of, I guess, the Pichichi thing? And also, so what are the odds? I think it's very possible, Kiyan.
Yeah, 3 goals is nothing. It could be done in a game.
I mean, obviously he just scored 4, so I think it's very possible, and I also think that the team will really get behind him to do it. We've seen that before in years that were down years for Madrid. The team did sort of rally to make sure that Ronaldo got that trophy. So, all right. So the second part of Mark's question: who do you play as a starting 11 against Juve?
I'm done guessing the starting 11 for this
I am
team.
too.
Yeah, we don't know.
We also already have said many times, how you and I might roll out a team that would be different from what Zidane is doing. But so far, in 2018, Zidane has showed very few tactical issues, in my opinion. So
I think the main thing that we haven't seen though yet is because right now the go-to is 4-4-2.
Right.
But that's also because we haven't had Modric, Kroos, Casemiro, all 3 of them start in a game for a long time and be healthy. And if those 3 are available, you can't really go with the 4-4-2 anymore. So does that mean BBC again?
Yeah.
Essentially, it comes down to availability.
Yeah. I just have I have nothing.
Yeah.
I have no idea. And I don't mean to to brush it off. I can't tell you what I would do, or I can tell you what I might do, but like.
But also, to be clear, this question comes almost every week, and it's hard to predict, right? Because Zidane surprises us.
All right, here's a good one. Anthony Vazquez asks us, if Ronaldo wins the Pichichi Trophy, the Champions League, and makes a deep run in the World Cup is enough to get him his 6th Ballon d'Or. I will say this, Anthony. I think historically these awards have overweighted the World Cup. International success is incredibly important when it comes to the Ballon d'Or. So he could not win the Pichichi or win the Pichichi, not win the Champions League. But if Portugal goes to the semifinals or even the final of the World Cup on the back of Ronaldo performing really well, then he probably is in with a real shout at the Ballon d'Or, even though he didn't have a great season in any other circumstance.
If he checks off all 3 of those that Anthony points out, I think he wins it.
Me too.
And I think a whole bunch of people will come out and say it was
unless Messi's Argentina wins the World Cup.
Right.
That would be a totally different thing too.
Yes. Good point. But if the former happens and Messi's team doesn't do better, I think Ronaldo will win it, and a bunch of people will come out and say he doesn't deserve it. I don't remember a player so universally hated for being successful. Maybe it's because we didn't really have social media back then when we
It's gotta be that.
Yeah, maybe just because we didn't see it, but.
You remember Figo? But that wasn't just for being good though. Like there were reasons they hated him in Barcelona. But no, I actually totally agree. I've been thinking a lot about like why people have such a visceral hatred of this player, and like it kind of boggles my mind a little bit.
If you
just the level of hatred, like, Jesus.
If you're in a forest by yourself and you whisper the word Ronaldo, somehow, somewhere out of the earth, like a bunch of Kool-Aids will pop up and say, Messi? Messi? No, Messi? Messi?
That's true. That's so true. Like, even like random people like will like make a tweet about Ronaldo that can just immediately become like a huge fight. It's not even like they'll just be like someone with like 75 followers or whatever will just like say something about, Cristiano Ronaldo, and then like it comes into this huge thing about like fucking wanka, all this stuff. Like, I just don't get it, man. That's a really good point though. Like, these people hide in the woods, they hide in the ground, waiting for the moment to pop their heads out and say, "Not as good as Messi."
I put out a tweet today after Ronaldo scored his 3rd goal, and I just said, "There's only one GOAT," and then not even a word of Ronaldo in that tweet, even though it was obvious. But the point is, you couldn't even search Ronaldo to find it. And still, the replies were Kool-Aids putting Messi pictures. And I'm like, how do you find this tweet? Do you just search GOAT and press refresh?
Dude, they must follow you. That's what I've never really understood. Like, why, if you're a fan of a rival team, you don't need to follow the journalist whose entire job is to cover your rival team.
A lot of them actually don't follow me. This is the weird thing. Yeah.
That's so weird. That's fucking really weird.
I think maybe they're bots who have to respond to the word GOAT or Ronaldo.
I sent you a thing talking about how how there are actually many different species of goat.
Yes, you did. Yeah, I liked it from the Managing Madrid account because I was flipping
lying media. That was really weird. But I made one point a while back about like something that Messi did that I thought was negative, and then just it was the same shit, man. Like, just it became like this huge fight, and like I don't know, it's just fucking insane. I've never dealt with this stuff before on this level of hatred. I must be if I'm really not, but if you were like really keyed into like politics Twitter, it's probably the same basic idea. It's like as soon as you say something, people are gonna fight with you. But like, it's awful.
Yes, this is the sad state of the internet. I would love to. For one day, I generally like to ignore these people, but for one day, I would just like set aside and have every single person who tweets this stuff at us to just come to our face and I want to like talk to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know they're not going to be nearly as vocal into my face.
No, of course not. Of course not. That's the whole point. It's the internet. I mean, what you could do is just like spend one day actually just dunking on these people. And some people do that occasionally, but like that's also a lot of your time that you're spending on these people, and that's just not worth it.
Exactly. Well, and they have the advantage of being anonymous while we don't.
Exactly. Well, yes, that's definitely true, especially considering, I mean, you especially are extremely visible. So like people know exactly who you are and what you're working on. And
unfortunately.
Ramid Nagy asks us, do you guys know if members have first access to tickets to the Champions League semifinal game if Real make it to the semis? I think so. Kiyan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that if you're a socio, you do have first access.
Yes.
But I don't know if that's what you mean by members. If that's what you mean, then yes, I think so. You should just figure that out yourself. But otherwise, no. And it's a little premature, a little premature to make this question, but feels like makes me want to knock on wood a little bit. Like, I'm not even that superstitious, but like,
I'm going to guess Ramin's situation. I think maybe he's potentially able to make a trip to Madrid that time of year, and he's maybe thinking of becoming a member. I don't know. But the answer to the question is yes. You get a priority to the tickets. And even big games, even if it's a Champions League final, you get priority. You get priority in away games. So it doesn't even have to be in the Bernabeu necessarily. But obviously it's not a guarantee, but you do get prioritized.
Blake Brown. Oh, I'm sorry. No. All right. So this is the question we've been waiting all day. We can wait on this one. Let's just do Blake's first. Blake Brown asks us, I know we as Real Madrid fans take for granted what Ronaldo does sometimes, but what a game today. I know I thought at the beginning of the season that he might be in decline, but he might take over the scoring title before it's over with. He never fails to surprise us. How much longer can he keep doing this? I know he says he wants to play for Real Madrid until he's 40. Playing like this, he just might. I mean, this is not so much of a question as like, we're both flabbergasted by how amazing he is. Like, he rules. This is incredible. I think Madrid should just roll this out as long as possible.
You milk it as much as you can, I guess. I mean, it completely is contradictory to what I've said about him in the past, and when to let go of him and when to move on from his legacy. But 40 is crazy. I don't think he gets there unless he really, really takes a backseat and he's willing to do that. 40 is a crazy number, but if there's anyone who can do it, it's him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. Like, I think here's what I'd tell you, Blake. I will say that I expect Ronaldo to play until he's 40. I don't expect him to play until he's 40 at Real Madrid, but I think he could be playing until he's 40. I actually don't think that's an insane thing, given the way he takes care of his body.
Wasn't Romario? How far did Romario play into his career? Maybe it's not going to be something like that, where Romario just...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what is going to happen, because he's actually a freak of nature and, one of the absolute best to ever set foot on a pitch. Like, this is, we joke about it, but like, he really is, absolutely in that conversation of the greatest footballer of all time. And like,
is incredible.
Okay. I want to do two let's do these two on Benzema. Joazi Dos Santos and Essa Hariri both asked us questions about Benzema, so I'm going to try to answer them together. Joazi Dos Santos asks us, anyone else starting to feel sorry for Benzema? I know he hasn't played too well recently, but it tugs at my heartstrings when he walks off the pitch all sad after not scoring. Essa Hariri, one of your questions is, do you think if Benz was wearing a number 19 shirt instead of number 9, considered a playmaker, people would still criticize him? I think he plays great as a playmaker. All right, so yes, it bums me out. I don't like to see him sad, Jose. That makes me sad, because he's such a happy, like, chill dude, and he's got the best social media presence of any Real Madrid player. Absolutely follow him. And yeah, it bums me out because I feel like I know him.
Yeah. You know what? I'd be interested if he opened up to the media about stuff, like how he feels about all this whole ordeal, being whistled and stuff, the way Andre Gomez did. And I'd be curious to know if the Bernabeu would respond the same way the Camp Nou responded to Andre Gomez. It'd just be interesting, because if you compare the two, Benzema has been far better in every sense of the world than Andre Gomez has been for Barca, for example. And I'd just be curious to know what the reaction would be if Benzema opened and said, "Look, this stuff really affects me mentally. It makes me sad. When I go home, it's hard to sleep at night and all this." I don't know if he actually feels that way. It seems to me he's tougher mentally than we probably think he is, because he's dealt well with it generally. The question about would we consider him, would he still get criticized if he was labeled as a playmaker and not a 9? Possibly, but I think what people get irked about him in general is not his playmaking or his perceived being a striker or whatever. I think it's the fact that he tends to miss his big chances and easier chances that, for example, someone like Ronaldo just finishes, no questions asked. So I think those criticisms would probably still exist.
I think here's a take that I have about Benzema. I think that he's going to be one of the people that in like 30 years, when we've done more digging and figured out a better, more comprehensive system of soccer analytics, that we're going to be able to look back at his career with those metrics and say, "Oh my God, this guy was way better than the metrics at the time gave him credit for." Like, there are a lot of people like that in baseball. There are people like that in basketball that have had these like kind of game-changing, post-career renaissances in terms of the way people talk about it. I think he's going to be the same thing, because I do think he's one of these players that actually makes everyone around him better when he plays the game. And we're going to be able to figure out why that is and be able to express it like in a stat, I think. And eventually, maybe not right away, but eventually we are, I think. And that, I think, will come back and we'll be able to look back on his career and say he was crucial in Madrid becoming this team that it became. And without him, it wouldn't have done that. So
I think 10 years, even tops. I think the revisionist history with people is crazy, because, look, I don't know if you remember. Well, we didn't really have social media. Well, we did, actually. Technically, we did. Maybe I'm thinking too far back. But during Raul's decline,
we definitely did.
I would check forums and stuff, and it was bad. The way people were treating Raul and criticizing him. And now, years later, after he's retired, you don't remember that part so much, right? You remember his legacy. And so I think once the recency bias just fades a bit, I think we'll zoom out and we'll look at Benzema's career and realize, this guy actually contributed a lot.
Yeah, dude, I agree. All right, let's see. Essa's other two questions. One is just like a historical one. What is the worst ever standing for Madrid in La Liga, and the worst ever standing in a year they won the Champions League? I can't answer the first one. I haven't done the research, but I bet that they finished mid-table a couple times.
I have it if you want to know.
Yep.
1947-48 season, we finished 11th.
There you go.
And that was in a 14-team league, by the way.
11th in a 14-team league. Yeah. Very different from 11th right now. Yes. Worst ever standing in a year they won the Champions League, Kiyan. Let me guess this one. My guess, if I remember correctly, there were the back-to-back Septima and Octava were both years where Madrid did not have a good Liga campaign. And I don't remember which one was worse. But
actually, I think they were both equally bad.
Okay.
No, they weren't equally bad. The worst ever was 99-2000. We finished
the Octava.
Yeah,
right?
we finished 5th. And that was the year, if we didn't win the Champions League, we wouldn't have qualified for Europe, the Champions League next season. We had to win it. And poor Zaragoza, who finished 4th, got dropped down to the UEFA Cup because...
They don't do that now.
No, they didn't do that anymore, but back then it was a thing. Zaragoza was really banking on Valencia to beat us in the final because they knew that if we won, they wouldn't get in the Champions League.
That sucks for them. Yeah, that sucks. So that I remember very vividly, and like it was actually a fascinating year for Madrid. But yeah, that ruled. That's like sort of the way it goes, and sometimes I remember when I was a kid, there was these things thinking like, yeah, well, there's always the Champions League if the Liga wasn't going too well, but we don't ever want to be in the place like we are right now. Okay. last two questions. The first one is a pretty long one from Shay. So Shay Katiri is basically giving the kind of pessimist take on this game, which I think is fair, and we didn't do maybe enough of it. But he says, this game was alarming. We outscored our problems. I know this is getting routine, but Bale not starting is on my last nerve. Zidane played a short midfield. Kroos is tall, but not good in the air, against a very tall team, which was problematic. Carvajal is the best right back in the world, but he is not suited to man-mark Stuani on a set piece. Casemiro would have changed a lot of things defensively. I don't get why a team which was the deadliest in the world in the air has lost its aerial deadliness, and instead is conceding so many goals in the air. On a positive note, how did the world manage to not discover Navas until he was 27? It is ridiculous that we paid only 10 million for him. I'm out of words about Cristiano. He's God. We would have lost the game without Keylor and Cristiano. So okay, and you'd be surprised if he doesn't win Pichichi. Okay, so I don't have much to add. This is a bunch of good points, but I didn't see any real questions here. So I agree with all of this stuff, right? I mean, it is upsetting, and I think Shay does bring up a really good point, Kiyan, that we didn't really get into, but it's true that Girona is actually quite tall. That's a big team, and Madrid did not roll out a very big lineup.
Yeah, there's a lot here. I think outscoring our problems, depending on how you look at it, actually can be a good thing, because Real Madrid is this is their identity, be it good or bad, is outscoring their opponents into oblivion. And this is how we did, towards the tail end of last season. The Super Cup was incredible, and we've written columns about this. It's our press was great, our defense was generally good, and when it wasn't, we would outscore opponents anyway. And that was problems Zidane would say, right or wrong, after the press conferences during every loss this season. He would say, look, the tactics were fine, but we're not finishing our chances. And it's true and not true. It's not true because there's a lot of problems apart from finishing. It's true because if Real Madrid meets its expected goals, it still wins those games and masks all the problems. And basically 2018 has been in that mold of, look, we're just blowing our expected goals out of the water. So that's fine. Yeah. I think maybe we can just quickly go through every sentence and answer really quickly. Bale didn't start because him and Modric were still coming back from injury. It's true, though, that he hasn't started in previous big games, even though he was 100% healthy. So I'm with you, Shay. I think the weird thing is, if Zidane prefers the 4-4-2 or Vazquez and Asensio on the flanks, it's not like Bale can't play exactly how Vazquez and Asensio are playing in that same kind of style. So it's not like Zidane would have to shuffle the scheme in order to do that. So I'm with you. What can you do against, for the set piece thing? Because we can say, why was Carvajal the one marking Stuani? Certain instances, for example, the second goal conceded, Carvajal just kind of happened to be there on Stuani. And sometimes you just can't control what unfolds naturally, right? I'm sure we would have liked to have Varane on him instead, but the reality was Varane really, without Casemiro, was kind of the only guy who could clear things consistently in this game, given our short lineup, as Shay pointed out. Was there anything else to address? I'm just kind of rambling now.
No, I agree with all that. The world didn't discover Keylor until he was 27. Anyone who followed Spanish football knew about him, because Levante went from, as soon as he left, Levante went from being actually an incredibly solid defensive team to a disaster. And that Levante side, one remembers watching him, I do at least, and thinking, man, this guy, right? It was obviously not a kid, but this guy's really good. He was on Levante a couple years before the World Cup, which was his real coming out party, where he literally carried that just not great Costa Rica team to the quarterfinals, right? I think so, to the knockout rounds at least, by just providing absolute power performances, just fucking epic poems as a keeper, just games where he would stop 37 shots and a penalty. It was incredible watching that World Cup. So, and he's been basically that same guy for Madrid.
he's been amazing this year. Can't complain. Yeah. Just nice to see him bounce back after his injury. A below average season last season. This year has been great.
Yeah. All right. Last question. Our man Chris McCormick asked us to talk about our favorite podcast that we've recorded and our least favorite podcast that we've recorded. So, Kiyan, at the beginning of the show, or before we started recording, you were telling me that you would think about what your least favorite one is. So, do you want to lead with that?
Yeah, First of all, this is one of the tougher questions we received because it's hard to pinpoint what was a good podcast, what was a bad podcast. But generally, I guess some of the most memorable ones in terms of good podcasts were I remember after the game against Bayern in the Champions League at home, the second leg, where it was one of the most nerve-wracking games I've witnessed in a while, because it was in extra time. Our hearts were all quenched, just trying to breathe during that whole game. And we won, and the podcast itself felt like a relief. Like it was like, oh, you just kind of let it all out. Yeah. You got everything you had on your mind out. You're happy. You're relieved. That one stuck out for me. And obviously the duodecima one, the final, was obviously great. Ones that I kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. And
that was a really fun show. I remember that one.
Yeah, and ones that left a sour taste in my mouth, not because the podcast itself was bad, but because in the beginning of the season, when things weren't going well, we got a lot of negative questions and nasty comments directed at us, as if like it was like our fault that Benzema wasn't playing well, or
right.
Bale was getting injured or whatever. And it was like, and it's like, if you said something in favor of a player that fans don't like, they've already made up their mind about what your narrative is, right? And so we had to deal with a lot. So in a way, I feel bad for podcasts of teams like Arsenal, who have to do like an Arsenal podcast every week. I'm sure they exist. And what they probably have to deal with, given the season that they go through. We have it good. Like, Real Madrid, generally, we have more to cheer about than be upset about. But still, I feel like we're just kind of spoiled. And those are the podcasts that I don't enjoy as much, as dealing with that kind of shit.
Yep, I agree with that. And it's funny because like my first instinct was like, oh, it was really unpleasant to like record the show, like especially that one after Madrid coughed up that goal to Messi in minute 90 or whatever in the Bernabeu last season. That was, but the thing is that the podcast actually wasn't that unpleasant. It was actually really nice and cathartic, and listening to other people complain and talking it through is really nice. It actually, you're totally right, Kiyan. The ones that have been unpleasant are when we know that, and when we're getting angry reaction from people on social media who are attacking us, as if it's just kind of like the unpleasant extension of the people that send us Facebook messages to tell us to start Gareth Bale in the next game. It's like we have no control over how this team plays, and it sucks when people get so angry at us and they send us these really hateful messages.
Yeah.
But you know what? I guess, and that's sort of the media world, right? And we're the flip side of like getting paid to do this is awesome, and getting to interact with all you wonderful people who are so nice and sweet with us and have been following us forever is a huge blessing in our lives, right? But that's the flip side of that, which is that like as we get more people following and listening to what we're saying, people are going to get pissed off. And like those, I think there was the one that the show we recorded, I think right after the Betis game earlier this season, it was quite negative in the comments. And like we were telling people all year, like it's expected goals, like we're going to even out eventually. And like we didn't even out in time, but you are seeing Madrid kind of regressing to the mean with their expected goals. And it just sucked that we got into those places. I think, anyways, I don't have any specific one that was very unpleasant. I will say, shout out Josh, Zeitlin, my original co-host, one of my favorite podcasts I ever recorded. It was a video podcast after Real Madrid beat Bayern Munich, where Josh and I polished off a 6-pack of Heineken while we were recording a video show, because Heineken had sent us to an event where we got to speak with Morientes. That was the year of the Decima. So that was a fun-ass show. But I got to tell you, I think a lot of shows where we've gotten to like vent and gripe together about how like the things that we didn't want to happen happened actually are really memorable and good in my head.
Mm-hmm. One of I guess one of the more fun podcasts I've had in a while was 2 or 3 weeks ago on the Churros y Tácticas podcast. I recorded one with David Garrido and Diego Lorin. And there was some fun shit talking and banter on that podcast, and it was just kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I listen. Like it's what's funny is that all of a sudden, and it kind of came out of nowhere because no one would have foresaw it last season or even like beginning of the season when Isco was unbelievable against Italy in the qualifiers. Isco has unfortunately become like the Benzema now, in terms of just a crazy polarizing figure that people either love or hate, and it's like one or the other, and it's extreme. And it's like, I think you were off that night. And I don't remember which game it was after in particular. We spent a whole pod outlaying why Isco is a problem in the diamond, and then we had people basically say, "Why do you hate Isco?" and all this, and we laid out the facts. We brought up examples. We brought out stats. We brought out the eye test stuff and why. And then the next podcast, I think we said something positive about Isco, and then people were like, "Why do you defend Isco?" And
oh my god!
And it's like you're either one or the other. And there's for people, it's just like inconceivable that you might be in between and objective and looking at it factually from all different angles. God forbid that people might think you do this as an analyst. It's either you hate or love, and somehow in the same podcast you're both, depending on what you've already made up your mind that we are. And I think those podcasts, I want to sit down with these people and just actually listen to them and see how they would debate in real life, because it's like they say one line and then they run off, and it's like they're trying to poke the bear or something.
Yeah.
And those podcasts, I really shouldn't like think about it so much, but those comments drive me nuts for that reason, because I feel like people just have no idea what the context is. They don't really follow your work. They hear something you say and they made up their mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Christopher McCormick, you just opened up a whole Pandora's box.
It's a little bit of free therapy for both of us.
Yeah. I needed to get that off my chest.
It's been burning me up. That's funny. That's I think something that I really don't like is it's less like people just importing their biases onto me and being like anyone like that's super annoying. But like I remember that. I think maybe I just got I got immune to that because of the Kaká saga, when was the first real controversy that we had on the site, and people were just absolutely fucking vulgar and like. Anyways, I think what bothers me a little bit more is people doing more of the second thing that you said, which is like people who really don't follow us coming in as kind of saying negative stuff to us who don't have any idea about what they're talking about, and that fucking annoys me. That sucks.
This is good. We needed a bit of therapy.
All right. Well, that's basically your show for this week. We've gone a little over, but that's cool. It's fun. We're having a fun time. Madrid scored 6 goals today, so yeah. we get a good fun show. So do we want to do shout outs?
Let's do it. Patreon.com/Managing Madrid if you would like to support the show. $1 a month is a minimum. You get access to extra bonus content, midweek content, Champions League post-game shows, other stuff. And you get different rewards based on how much you pledge. One of your rewards, if you pledge $10 or more, is that you get a specific shout out to this podcast. So shout out to you, I think 340 now patrons, which is amazing. Shout out to these patrons specifically: Nick De Stefane, Frederick Sundros, Leon Stavronakis, Bjorn Salvador, John Fernandez, Said Mahad, Sergio Monleon, Red Bat, Anthony Vazquez, Yahya Ibrahim, Nick Ribeiro, Eric Rogers, Sheikh Hatiri, Ian Marley, Dan Berthy, Jahan Watson, Anton Hackberg, Jimmy Obaid, Daniel Smith, Solomon Ortiz, and Jeanette.
Thank you.
MVPs.
Yeah, so there, I don't know, Kiyan, do you have anything you want to plug that's coming up?
What's today, Sunday? Yeah, I guess I'm going to write something about probably a tactical preview against Juve sometime this week. Diego and I will be doing True to Tacticas podcast Monday. We'll actually be doing more podcasts because I'm sure you have Let's Fix Football, but Wednesday you and I will probably be doing a Patreon podcast. Thursday, I'm going to do 2-part podcasts. Part one with Jamie Kemp, who covers Las Palmas, to preview the Las Palmas game on next weekend, and also might come on the show on a part 2 to talk about his Real Madrid all-time 11.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That's an interesting. He made some interesting choices, my man.
He did.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, we have Let's Fix Football. We were late coming out with it this week because we wanted to try to get a guest to come talk about what went down in Iran, where they arrested a group of women at the Tehran Derby. We're still ironing that out. I'm really excited if we can work that in, but we will still do a show. It'll be funny and all that stuff. I'm sure we'll talk about Sergio Ramos's suits and all the other funny stuff that's been going on. So yeah. But yeah, so until Wednesday then, Kiyan, we'll do a Patreon show then. Again, $1. That's all you need, $1. Yeah, so until then, man, a la Madrid.
A la Madrid.